Today we're going to be revisiting Skyrim and taking a look at my favorite mods in 2018. It's crazy how much great stuff is still being made here, and my yearly revisit to the modding scene is something I look forward to each time. Now for the list, a byproduct of trying to keep it rather small, I'm only considering large or large-scoped mods, things that either do a lot or touch a lot. So if your favorite mod is something that adds a really defined spiderweb and it's not here, that's why. Also, I'm going to try to stick to separate game systems, so for the most part, all of this stuff will work together with minimal problems and not compete for a spot on your mod list. So let's just jump into it, with the first mod, Diverse Dragons Collections. This mod adds 30 non-boss dragon types and close to 40 new attacks to the game. Themed much more heavily than having the same model but one has ice breath and one has fire breath that you find in vanilla, this gives an absolute huge amount of variation into dragon encounters that typically have people on multiple playthroughs rolling their eyes when they hear the music. To put it into perspective, vanilla has 7 dragon types, and some of those are just higher level versions or DLC specific. The dragons in this mod will also level up and scale with your level, using unique textures and unique models, and also allow you to customize or remove specific dragons if you feel they are not lore friendly. It's rare when a mod can have a drastic impact on a game while also integrating seamlessly and without additional systems, fix a problem, add variation, and be incredibly compatible with basically everything. That's DDC, and that's probably my favorite mod on this entire list. The second mod, and I'll catch some hate here because I'm not gonna say Ordinator, is SPERG. Now, this is a perk overhaul mod, and the thing with perk overhauls, they're popular because if you've been playing Skyrim for years or even just a couple playthroughs, variation for the sake of variation is very appealing. Almost all perk mods change or add new stuff, and this is no exception. What makes SPERG different and best for me are two things. First, it doesn't add or bloat out the perk trees, and I'll touch on something about this in a second, but you actually have less options, and this allows each perk to have a larger influence on your character's power level. Other perk mods, you can go through, say, the one-handed skill tree, and you'll get one perk that gives stamina on the third hit, another perk that increases your chance to stun on the second hit, bleeds on crits, and a power attack that gives you an attack speed buff and 5% more damage if you are attacking somebody who doesn't have a shield. And it all sounds great until none of it changes how you play. It all gets sort of boiled down into small bumps in effectiveness with creative wording that you largely wouldn't even notice if one of them just wasn't working. I find that especially when you're progressing your character, less is more, and more powerful singular perks is the way to go. The second part of this mod is that in each perk tree, there exists almost a spine, and this exists in other mods as well as vanilla, and these spines will run up and they act like kind of a tiering system, and you definitely notice it in the spell school perks where it's like apprenticed, adept, master level, etc, and when you unlock those, you basically get the ability to function at that tier effectively. These are boring and typically aren't fun to spend perk points on. SPERG actually grants the spine perks automatically just by playing the game and leveling up the skill level organically. So if you level up Sneak, more than the numerical skill number increasing that's benefit is outweighed usually by a single perk, you'll see real improvement as you're granted those tiered threshold perks. This allows you to get better at doing the things that you're already doing, as well as opens up the trees so you don't need to invest, say, 4 points to get the only thing in a tree that you like, because as long as your skill's high enough, you can branch off of that tree. On top of fluff stuff like gaining armor skill by wearing armor instead of taking damage or leveling through shouts, the great thing about SPERG is it allows perks to influence gameplay much more and gameplay to influence gameplay much better. And on top of that, when I typically play this game, I like to set my perks so I gain like 1 every 2 levels, so lower the amount of perks that I actually get to further enhance that. But also I will add perks as rewards to other based things, and it allows you a little bit of design space to give you rewards for other content that's really kind of cool. And some ideas here are, there's some mods to turn dragon souls into perks, as well as the ESO soul shards from Arthmore, which is also a really cool exploratory based reward system. Now, next up is Legacy of the Dragonborn. This is a DLC-sized mod that adds the Explorer Society to Skyrim. Essentially, this Explorer Society wants you to hunt down, showcase, and boast about all of the cool stuff that you find in the game. I love that it adds a bit of value to items I typically don't care about. Say I'm out exploring and I find a unique two-handed sword, but I'm currently playing my 10th stealth archer, I'd normally just ignore it. But now the item means something. I want to make sure that I get it, I bring it back, I showcase it. The collector's itch in me starts to seek out as much rare stuff as I can, but the coolest part of the mod is it low-key acts as a curator of fan-made content, having incorporated many other people's mods, whether they're weapon mods, dungeon mods, quest mods, etc., into itself, and offering an unheard of amount of compatibility patches with other mods of a specific quality level. This allows you to create a playthrough built around this mod, and honestly, you could just go through the compatibility patches and download each of those mods only, and you're going to have a massive amount of content. It's all going to feel cohesive because it's all done, or it's all incentivized through the Legacy of the Dragonborn. And I'm not even talking about the amount of content via just being a fully fleshed out guild within the game. I'm not talking about the voice acting. I'm not talking about the systems that are thematical to the Explorer Society that the game adds. There is a lot of game here, but the real draw for me is it makes collecting items feel a bit like this abstract progression system in a game with a lot of items. I think that this is a must play, even if it's just for one playthrough for most people. Shifting over to enemies, we have Know Your Enemy, which essentially adds a lot of traditional RPG elements to the defenses of enemies as well as to your own armor. Looking through how it does this is rather interesting and definitely clever, as it uses a keyword trait system that assigns properties to methods of attack as well as defenses, habitats, enemy types. So now there is an exaggerated difference between something like a blunt weapon versus a blade and what it's effective against. And it creates those traditional interactions you may remember from way back in the day, where a skeleton, he has no flesh to cut, so you don't want a blade. You want to bash him in with a blunt weapon. You also probably can't poison a skeleton or a dwarven machine. That doesn't make sense to be able to poison that. And how your armor reacts to shock damage might just depend on how conductive it is. Most of the interactions make sense and don't go completely overboard and make the game a slog, but it feels rewarding because it does allow you to plan ahead or exploit a weakness. It infuses a level of preparation and a part of role-playing experiences that I've always loved into Skyrim, allowing you to make more choices to play well outside of combat. And one of the unsung features of a mod like this is when you add other difficulty-based mod, even if you increase the health of the enemies, you stress how important this specific mechanic is, and so all of a sudden you become the Witcher who needs to have a silver sword and a normal sword, one for slaying the undead and one for everything else, except in this case you want a source of fire damage, you want a source of blunt, etc. And so it becomes a difficulty mod, it becomes a role-playing mod as much as you want it to be. So if Know Your Enemy focuses on defense, then this next mod, Skyrim Revamped Complete Enemy Overhaul, will focus on offense. Now, there are a few other mods that do similar things to this mod, but this is probably my favorite. There's a patch to make this and Know Your Enemy play nice, and the combination of these is just great. They complement each other very well. This mod will change the enemies to have a bit of an identity or attack style for themselves, whether that's because they've been given access to other spells or abilities or changes in their AI and behavior. Each enemy type will pose a different type of threat, and the personal attention that is paid to the bosses is very appreciated, making them more than just health sponges without giving them some of the overtuned stats or abilities that similar mods have. Number 6 is actually a few mods depending on your familiarity with making modding work, and these mods are SKYTWEAK, Simply Balanced, and ELEGY. Essentially, SKYTWEAK and Simply Balanced allow you to edit a bunch of different values to create and balance your own game, increase your health or the enemy's health, decrease regeneration, require it to take more to level, change the difficulty of lockpicking. You can really edit a ton. It just requires that you know what you want to tweak and in what way, and once you get comfortable with these type of things, you can replace a lot of mods in your mod list by just clever editing here, which is where ELEGY comes into play. This works a lot like one person's collection of minor tweaks. If you modded in Fallout in the past, there was this mod called the J. Sawyer mod, which a lot of people see as the way the people making the game wanted it to play, but couldn't because it had to be more streamlined. ELEGY is that for Skyrim in a way. The amount of changes is huge, but in a line, it kind of de-gamifies certain aspects and moves the needle a little bit further towards realism or immersion, and just moving in that direction. It's not like this is trying to be super realistic or a simulation. So you're going to see things like loot being rarer, carry weight being reduced, the value of gold increasing but bartering being harder, serious quest lines only starting when you're a serious hero, rebalancing of food and the leveling curve. It touches a lot and is probably the mod that is the least compatible with everything else here, but it's a great indicator of the kind of changes you can make yourself easily with mods like SKYTWEAK or Simply Balanced. This next mod is actually a mod from the Creation Club. Cue the groans, I know how people feel about paid modding. It is the Skyrim Survival Mode. Okay, let me get this out of the way. Yes, I know you can create similar and more complex versions of what this mod does through the use of multiple free mods. Yes, I know that the modding community seems to absolutely hate the idea of people getting paid for making mods and everything that stands for. But the Skyrim Survival Mode does what it does in, I believe, the best way, and is still moddable if more complexity is what you're after. So a brief blurb about what it does is it introduces survival-based mechanics into the game, like needing to eat or sleep, stay dry and warm, as well as tweaking gameplay settings to make the game not so much harder, but harsher. So things like removing health regeneration, removing fast travel, and improving, or rather making them more lethal and less ignorable, the disease and affliction system, among other things. But a big boon for this mod is that it's connected right into the game, complete with widgets and indicators, and works without configuration. It adds a dumbed down version of needing to survive in the game that a lot of people love from, say, Frostfall or Campfire. But that dumbed down version allows it to not overpower the original Skyrim experience, so you don't feel like you're playing through an episode of Man vs. Wild. It just means getting bit by a rabid dog might have additional implications, and you don't have to go and add each individual setting that this mod adds that again is completely integrated into the original game. Now, we haven't looked at graphic mods, and that's because they're largely subjective, but I'll skirt the line with one quasi-graphic mod, an NPC overhaul mod, WINDSONG Immersive Character Overhaul, which is on this list because it makes most characters look better, period, but not like cover girls. It still feels, I guess thematic is the word, thematically medieval, and not like somehow Skyrim has a very busy plastic surgeon. It's unfortunate that there haven't been many character overhauls like this, as this mod has had some compatibility hangups in the past, and if you just install it normally, there's also like these random features that can cause you issues if you don't quite know what you're doing that you wouldn't expect in an NPC overhaul, but it's the best NPC overhaul that exists in my opinion, so I use it and I recommend it. I always throw this next non-mod into modding lists because I want as many people to see it, especially less experienced modders, Beth I. It breaks down to being a more in-depth configuration tool for your initial settings, and while having the extra control to tweak stuff is always good, they have their own presets for performance. Low, medium, high, and ultra, and you'll see it's like the Beth I low, medium, high, and ultra. And they also have a recommended tweak tick, and even if that's all you do, most of the time this is going to not only give you more performance, but in some cases will even make the game look better as it does it. I don't know what kind of witchcraft happens on the back end there, but I tweaking for Skyrim is kind of a form of modding completely separate to adding assets and things to the game, and this automates that and gives you a really good, if anything else, it's a really good starting point if you want to get into I modding in the future, and it could prevent some future crashes or instability issues or problems that you're just not going to face down the line. And the final mod here is almost just a shout out. It will not be compatible with most of the mods that I've listed prior because this is a massive game overhaul. It's the equivalent of playing someone else's mod list with their tweaked settings, and that mod is Yash, yet another Skyrim hardcore mod. This came out at the very end of 2016 and has been polished over time with rapid updates, but that's late in terms of Skyrim modding. The thing is, it gets harder and harder to stand out because many lists, filter settings on Nexus, player comfort mods, etc. are comprised of old mods when the player count was higher, and because it was higher downloads, higher endorsements, and so those seem to overshadow newer mods that show up on the websites that we look at mods for. Outdated mods as well that people still use aren't compatible with these mods or don't play nice, or they're doing the same type of features, and especially in an overhaul mod, that means basically everything. In the scene, the only real overhaul mod that seems to get talked about a lot is Requiem, which is great too, but Yash in a lot of ways is something that has a ton of overlap into the way that I already mod Skyrim, and the reason I tried this overhaul initially is because one line that he says in his description that spoke to my soul, and is in response to something that I feel has polluted a lot of recent RPG games, and that is that Yash focuses on character skill over player skill. And currently, that's an unpopular game opinion to have. In addition, Yash doesn't add, it changes, and so when you're playing it, it doesn't feel like a mod, just how this game might have felt, potentially, with a different design team behind it. It's a lot more old school, and dare I say, closer to Morrowind than it is to Oblivion, and changes Skyrim from a game I'd personally consider an action-adventure game with RPG elements to an action RPG. If you're the type that just needs an excuse for another playthrough, Yash is worth it. The author upkeeps his Nexus page meticulously and also maintains a very impressive listing of compatible mods with suggested actions maybe to make it more compatible, or comments on what changes or what problems you'll have if you use that mod. So say you do want to try out Yash but you want to spice it up a bit, or you won't have another playthrough of Skyrim without your favorite blue cat Inigo, you may just be in luck. So yeah, at the moment, these are my favorite mods, and something that I find really interesting is that a lot of them are from the last year or two. The modding scene continues to chug along and improve on what we've always had. Maybe I'll take a crack at more categoric mod lists in the future. Leave any ideas in the comments, and until next time, this is Fevir. Peace.